This is Ukraine, once a prosperous and successful country with nuclear potential, rich mineral resources, incredible reserves of minerals, fertile lands, dense forests, and clean rivers. Once, before the beginning of the foreign intervention. Throughout the history of independent Ukraine, world geopolitical leaders dreamed of snatching a part of it from themselves, bribing our politicians like a squid, spreading tentacles into all independent institutions of our country, establishing external control over independent sovereign state. And let's be frank, in many ways, they succeeded. We call our film Ukrainian Lives Matter because we don't want to be slaves and hostages of international corruption. We want to live in independent and sovereign country, in a country where people don't get killed for freedom of speech, and while the brutal murders of free journalists Georgi Gangadze, Alice Buzina, Pavel Sheremet have not yet been investigated in Ukraine, we, a group of independent investigators, are forced to hide our faces to be able to show you the truth. And today, we want to dwell on just one of the outrageous facts of Ukrainian external control, connected with no one but with the 46th President of the United States, Joe Biden. Admit it, Joe. Did your son work and receive a salary in a Ukrainian company? Okay, Joe. Now tell us, did you bribe Ukrainian politicians? Did you blackmail the Ukrainian government with a loan guarantee from the International Monetary Fund? Okay, Joe. Would you like to watch a video of our investigation into your corrupt influence in Ukraine? Sorry for you, Joe, but you'll have to. Truth must prevail. In this video, we will provide the viewer only with accurate facts, documents, and evidence about the external governance of Ukraine. Show scanned copies of documents about multi-million bribe and corruption as a form of business. We will show how the white master of world democracy, Joe Biden, with his clan, colonized Ukraine and turned it into his fitting throne. How he took over all power in our state, posing as a fluffy kind white rabbit. Isn't that so, Joe?
I do.
Then let's get to the point and take a look at the facts and evidence. Let's go. I'm Nadya Savchenko. I'm not afraid to show my face when I'm telling the truth. The film I want to present to you was shown to me by investigative journalist. I'm not a journalist, nor I'm an investigator, but I was aware of the facts mentioned in the film. When I was a member of the Parliament of Ukraine, of the AIDS Convention. Every time I try to talk about international corruption, about the external influence on Ukraine as a state, I hear the same phrase all the time. Don't you dare, this will damage our relation with Western external partners. But let's see if they are really our partners, those external invaders. This is Robert Hunter Biden, the son of the 46th US President Joe Biden. In these photographs, the son of the American president takes drugs and has sex with 14-year-old girls, spending our money on all this, money stolen from the people of Ukraine. While the Ukrainians are in poverty, the children of our white master, who have turned Ukraine into a slave colony, are having fun with our money. And these are not big words. Unfortunately, these are the facts. In his memoir, Beautiful Things, Hunter Biden admits that the money he received from Burisma helped fuel his alcohol and drug addiction. I was buying crack cocaine on the streets of Washington, D.C. I needed a drink so badly that I couldn't walk a block from a liquor store to my apartment without uncorking the bottle to take a sip. $50,000 a month was paid only by the Ukrainian gas company Burisma, the board of directors of which he joined in 2014, when his dad was in charge of Ukraine as the vice president of Obama administration.
The horrible emails of the kind of money that you were raking in, you and your family. And Joe, you were vice president when some of this was happening, and it should have never happened. And I think you owe an explanation to the American people.
With regard to Ukraine, we had this whole question about whether or not, because he was on the board, I later learned, Burisma, a company, that somehow I had done something wrong. I have not taken a penny from any foreign source ever in my life. My son has not made money.
Seriously, maybe we didn't hear it properly. Let's listen again.
I have not taken a penny from any foreign source ever in my life. My son has not made money.
And now, from words to deeds, let's look at the facts. And yes, Joe, there is not a penny, but millions of dollars from Ukraine, which according to your son Hunter, from his book Beautiful Things, ruined his business career and family relationships. These are scanned copies of invoices that show that Hunter Biden's company received nearly $5 million from the Ukrainian company Burisma. So what now, Joe? Not a penny? We still wonder why the son of the American president received Ukrainian money. I would like to have a job where there is less work. I can be the boss. According to Hunter Biden in his memoir, Beautiful Things, his last name was like gold to Burisma Holdings. It opened doors that were closed to other people. It was both a privilege and a burden. Yes, it was a burden. Millions of stolen taxpayer money spent on prostitutes and drugs. This is where our money went. And this resonant scandal with Burisma and Hunter Biden revealed important facts and evidence for journalists and the world community, which showed how and in whose interest Joe Biden team is working, managing the politicals and power in Ukraine. To understand this in more details, let's start from the very beginning, with Burisma Holdings and Nikolai Zlochevsky. Burisma Holdings was established by the controversial Minister of Ecology and Natural Resources from the time of fugitive President Yanukovych, Nikolai Zlochevsky. Burisma Holdings is a private gas production group in Ukraine. The company is the only vertically integrated holding company in the country engaged in the exploration, production, service, and sale of gas. Burisma Group is one of the three largest independent gas producers in Ukraine, headquartered in Cyprus. The company is registered in Cyprus. Occupying the chair of Minister of Ecology and Natural Resources of Ukraine, Nikolai Zlochevsky issued license to his own companies for the most profitable gas fields. Here are the scanned copies from the State Financial Monitoring Service of Ukraine, which says that within the framework of the above criminal proceedings, it was established that Nikolai Zlochevsky, holding the position of Minister of Ecology and Natural Resources of Ukraine in 2010 through 2012, being the owner of the Cypriot company Broziti Investments Limited, which in turn is owned by the Cypriot company Burisma Holdings Limited, abusing his official position, ensured the provision of permits for the use of subsoil resources in Ukraine to those enterprises and subsequently made a profit from their operations related to the extraction of hydrocarbons in Ukraine. This means that Zlochevsky turned the ministry into his profitable and the mineral resources of Ukraine into his personal capital. You are one of the wealthiest ministers in Ukraine. So they write. So it is. Well, probably it is. The shame of such fabulous wealth is simple and not new. They steal gas from the subsoil of Ukraine, laundering money, in the Baltic countries and Cyprus, and then deposit on their accounts in Great Britain and the United Arab Emirates, and they built palaces from themselves. But Euromaidan added problems not only to Viktor Yanukovych, but also to Nikolai Zlochevsky. Listen, I don't like the regime here. My heart feels that we are on the eve of a glorious mess. As it seemed in 2014, the Revolution of Dignity changed the government in Ukraine. It chased away the so-called family of Yanukovych. Nikolai Zlochevsky also fled the country. The new post-Maidan Prosecutor's General Office of Ukraine became investors in his money laundering schemes. But their interest suddenly disappeared as soon as international investigators became interested in these schemes. The Serious Fraud Office of the Government of the United Kingdom has opened an investigation into Nikolai Zlochevsky on suspicion of laundering 35 million. London wanted to investigate the illegal origins of this money and return it to Ukraine. What do you think happened next? The Prosecutor's General Office of Ukraine decided that the people of Ukraine didn't need this money and didn't provide London with evidence against Nikolai Zlochevsky. The PGO, headed by post-Maidan Prosecutor General Vitaly Yarema, reported that there are no open criminal cases against Nikolai Zlochevsky in Ukraine, that he is clean before the law, and they have no claim against Zlochevsky money arrested by London. Once again, but in simple words, London investigators say that this money was stolen from the people of Ukraine, and they are trying to return it to the budget of our country. But the PGO replies that it doesn't conduct any proceedings against Zlochevsky and that Zlochevsky is perhaps the most decent citizen of Ukraine. Complicated story. Doesn't it seem strange to you? Then listen to the Deputy Prosecutor General of Ukraine, who personally deal with the arrest and return of Zlochevsky's stolen money to Ukraine. So, there were cases. They were. The Prosecutor's General Office of Ukraine provided Zlochevsky lawyers with a document stating that their client is not accused of anything. There are no grounds for bringing him to justice in Ukraine. Zlochevsky defense presented these documents in a London court. I believe that this was one of the most important arguments why the London court decided to untie this money. You get it, right? Cases against Zlochevsky seem to exist, but at the same time, they seem to be absent. I don't understand what the secret is. When there's honey, then it is immediately gone. Meanwhile, an investigation by the U.S. Senate Homeland Security and Governmental Affairs Committee and the Committee of Finance on Hunter Biden's operation in Ukraine states in its report that Nikolai Zlochevsky bribed the Prosecutor General of Ukraine Vitaly Yarema with $7 million to close the case against Burisma. Naturally, Vitaly Yarema himself denies the fact of such a bribe. Kaсько headed to International Department with the Deputy Prosecutor General under Magnitsky, under Yarema, under Shokin. And when the Prosecutor General is accused of not returning someone from abroad or not agreeing to return the money, it was Kaськo issue, not mine. In other words, the Prosecutor General, as they say, points the finger to his deputy, and the deputy to the Prosecutor General. This ping-pong is just a smoke screen so that it would be challenging to find the guilty person. But everything is quite simple. No matter how many times you call hare a wolf, the hare will not become a wolf. The same thing with the bribe. Deny or not deny, but the fact remains. The case against Zlochevsky in Ukraine were closed. The London court was forced to remove arrest from the accounts of Nikolai Zlochevsky. While part of the Prosecutor's General Office of Ukraine is trying to return the stolen millions of Zlochevsky, and the other part, interested of replenishing the budget of Ukraine with this money, is hushing up Zlochevsky cases. Washington is giving money to our country for the development of post-Maidan reforms and anti-corruption bodies, including creating NABU, not gratuitously, of course. The National Anti-Corruption Bureau of Ukraine was created illegally. They just stole. Biden stole the investigative jurisdiction from the State Bureau of Investigations through NABU, created NABU, put their emissaries in NABU. NABU was created to keep a finger on the pulse of Ukraine for Biden and all his allies. And of course, where cash flows appear, a notable and familiar political figure also appears. Right, Joe? What is US Vice President Joe Biden thinking about as he stalls along the Maidan during the Revolution of Dignity? About democracy? About the fight against corruption? Or is he waving his web of influence for the new international corruption around the new Euromaidan government? At the same time, his son, Robert Hunter Biden, starts working for Burisma without any previous experience in gas companies. A coincidence? A coincidence, of course, Joe Biden would say. But we know the truth, and the truth is that Nikolai Zlochevsky, sensing a scent of trouble, decided in exchange for worldwide patronage to offer Joe Biden to share the profits of Burisma, using lobbying and offshore companies for this purpose. One of the beneficiaries of such a shell company, Rosemont Seneca, is Joe Biden's son, the same Hunter Biden. It is not clear why, but the Ukrainian company paid Hunter Biden an official salary of $50,000 a month.
Но это
There's even more.
еще не все.
There's even more. Konstantin Kulik, the head of the group of prosecutors in criminal proceedings to investigate the illegal operations of the organized criminal group of Yanukovych from 2015-2019. Konstantin Kulik interrogates a witness, a citizen of Latvia, who carried out financial transactions to launder and legalize money for Nikolai Zlochevsky. We cut off the chain of all money movement from one client's company to another belonging to him. This was because we changed the payment purpose for the bank transfer of money. For which companies? Burisma Holdings. Which else? Virologic Technology and Digitex organization. Did you have Nikolai Zlochevsky as a client? When did you start working with him? We started working with him in 2009-2010. Nikolai Zlochevsky had a lot of unaccounted cash hidden from taxes. We're talking about an amount of up to 10 million per month. Do you know the circumstances of the transfer of money for consulting services from the account of Burisma Holding to the account of the American company Rosemont Seneca Buhai? From November 2014 to October 2015, strange payments were made, which were in amount of 83,333.03. They repeated for about 20 payments. It was if there were some kind of large payment split into unequal parts that wouldn't attract the bank's attention. What money was used to credit this company account? The money of Nikolai Zlochevsky was used. The money of Nikolai Zlochevsky was used, which was transferred from the Virological Technology and Digitex. Is this then accounted cash from Ukraine that went to Burisma Holding and then was used for payments, including to Rosemont Seneca? Yes, and also to account of individual Alexander Kwasniewski with a Polish bank. How much? It was also for consulting services, but the amount was 1 million euros. To date, the Ukrainian Prosecutor's Office has information from the report of the Financial Intelligence Unit of Latvia that Burisma company paid at least 16.5 million in favor of 2 offshore shell companies, as well as Hunter Biden and his partners. These companies are mentioned in the scanned documents from financial monitoring units of Cyprus, Latvia, and Ukraine. Having no experience in gas production companies, Hunter Biden and his partners received $16.5 million from the Ukrainian company for consultations. In these photos, we see his professionalism and experience. Once again, the money stolen from the people of Ukraine and launched through offshore companies in different jurisdictions is the democratic value and the fight against corruption that Joe Biden promised us? Really, Joe? He should advise liquor shops, not gas companies. But it is clear that Zlochevsky didn't need Hunter Biden's consultations, but rather the partnership of his father, Joe Biden. Why would Biden defend Zlochevsky? Because Zlochevsky is one of the channels for plundering Ukraine. And by the way, regarding Hunter's partners, this way Zlochevsky covered up his criminal schemes not only from the United States, but also from the European Union. Sadly enough, the representatives of the European Parliament are also involved in the theft of Ukrainian money and international corruption in our country. How global corruption works. You take a person with a well-known name, preferably from the democratic Western world, and consumers in the domestic market in Ukraine are told that our Western partners are with us and they support us. But in reality, you are simply using a well-known name to cover up the corruption of one or another company. Money is siphoned off to offshore and divided between partners. It is beneficial for Western partners and our leaders, but it is not beneficial for the Ukrainian people, because Ukrainians pay for all funds siphoned off to offshore, for covering companies with well-known names, and for all supervisory boards. Consumers pay for this from their pockets. We pay for tariffs, we pay for medicine, we pay for roads, we pay for life, and we pay for everything. This is all global corruption. Money is taken away from Ukraine and shared within Western partners, and Ukrainians are told that it is profitable to have Western partners. Former President of Poland, Aleksander Kwaśniewski, has high authority in the European Union. He was a representative of the European Parliament mission and a mediator between Ukraine and European Union in the European integration of Ukraine. It is not surprising that the Ukrainian oligarch Nikolai Zlochevsky chose Kwaśniewski for European protection, making him a member of the board of directors of his company Burisma. I understand that if someone asks me to be a part of some project, it is not only because I'm so good, it's also because I'm Kwaśniewski and I'm a former president of Poland. And this is all interconnected. No names are nobody. Being Biden is not bad, it's a good name. Kwaśniewski himself admits that Zlochevsky bought authoritative person for himself in the company to protect his business and himself from the encroachments of justice on his schemes. We think you understand by now that they defended him for our money. It is worth admitting that Zlochevsky acted so wisely out of fear because the bribe of $7 million seemed insufficient to Ukrainian prosecutors, and they are reopening cases against Burisma. But Ukrainian President Petro Poroshenko appoints a new prosecutor general, Viktor Shokin. Viktor Shokin begins a large-scale, parade trail investigation into the machinations of Burisma and the criminal schemes of Nikolai Zlochevsky.
Shokin gets this communique from Latvia that shows a $16 million laundering transaction, classic laundering transaction. It goes from Ukraine to Latvia. It's disguised as a loan to another company, Wire Logic, I believe. It then goes to Cyprus, gets disguised as another loan. This is called Digitech. Then it's dispersed as payment of board fees. Now, you don't make 2 loans to pay board fees unless you're laundering the money. $3 million gets to Hunter Biden that way.
Joe Biden faced the threat of losing a stable income from Ukrainian citizens when the Prosecutor General office, headed by Viktor Shokin, initiated criminal proceedings against Burisma and concerning the theft of money from Ukrainians. Viktor Shokin tried to bring the case to its logical conclusion and bring it to court. You are silly as a goose. Boy, oh boy. Who would put him in a jail? He's a monument. As it turned out later, thanks to the so-called Derkach tapes, the American corruption cover of Nikolai Zlochevsky, which occupied the power of Ukraine, worked as a mechanism of a Swiss watch. Biden's son Hunter served on the board of directors of the company. Together with him, the money on the board of directors of Burisma was also received by a friend of the stepson of United States Secretary of State, John Kerry, his assistant, David Archer. This slide shows these three guys. Why is it so important? Because the recording of conversation show how Kerry, along with Biden, interested on the dismissal of Prosecutor General Shokin, who investigated the Burisma case, along with Biden, interested on the dismissal of Prosecutor General Shokin, who investigated the Burisma case and eventually went after Biden. John Kerry was supposed to test the water regarding the possibility dismissal of Shokin, which he did on December 3, 2015. Let's listen to this conversation.
But before Vice President Biden comes, I just wanted to try to urge you to see if there's a way to get by this problem of replacing the Prosecutor General, Shokin, because from our perception, he's blocked the cleanup of the Prosecutor General's office, and I know the Vice President is very concerned about it, and I think it'd be good to try to have some resolution of that before the Vice President comes, if it's possible, and have real clarity as to the steps that we're going to take forward. I think
the Secretary of State of another country is forcing the President of Ukraine to replace the Prosecutor General for investigating the influence and corruption in Ukraine of the son of then the Vice President of the United States. Is this not a direct fact of international corruption and external government of Ukraine? Is this not a fact of high treason on the part of the President of Ukraine?
Joe, I have a second positive news for you. Yesterday, I met with the General Prosecutor Shokin.
yes.
And despite of the fact that we didn't have any corruption charges, we don't have any information about he doing something wrong, I especially asked him, no, it was the day before yesterday, I especially asked him to resign as his position as a state person, and despite of the fact that he has a support in the parliament. And as a finish of my meeting with him, he promised me to give me the statement on resignation. And 1 hour ago, he bring me the written statement of his resignation.
Great.
289. The resolution has been adopted. Parliament agreed to dismiss the Prosecutor General of Ukraine. Joe Biden, isn't this proof of your corrupt influence in Ukraine? You, of course, can deny this telephone conversation, operating by the fact that it was somehow edited. But you confessed yourself to the whole world that you forced the President of Ukraine to fire Shokin. And this is blackmail. Moreover, the blackmail of someone else billing dollars, by the way, which Poroshenko accepted and used at his enterprises. Joe, this is influencing the government of another country. Don't you know?
You're not getting the billion. I'm going to be leaving here, and I think it was, 6 hours? I looked, I said, I'm leaving in 6 hours. If the prosecutor's not fired, you're not getting the money. Well, son of a bitch. Got fired.
I'm a man of my word. And that now that the new Prosecutor General's in place, we're ready to move forward in signing that new $1 billion loan guarantee. And I don't know how you want to go about that.
First of all, thank you very much indeed for these words of support. Believe me that it was very tough challenge and very difficult job, and Mrs. Timoshenko and Mr. Leshko fraction tried to break this, because we not only voted for the new prosecutor general, which we do in a very short period of time, within one day we changed the law. By the way, in this law we presenting the new structure of the General Prosecutor Office, including the General Inspection, as we agreed with you.
That's brilliant.
And the second thing, I immediately invite Lutsenko and said that he should contact your embassy, and I would be very pleased if you will have a certain person who can come either from Washington or whenever.
Is this not a corrupt influence on the president of Ukraine? Is this not a control of the prosecutor office of Ukraine? Is this not external control of a country alien to you, but a native country for us, Ukraine? The scandal that broke out in the United States was supplemented not only with photos and videos of Hunter Biden's orgies from a laptop he forgot in a service center, but also correspondence from it, from which it is confirmed that Joe Biden was aware of affairs of the Burisma company. Dear Hunter, thank you for inviting me to Washington and giving me the opportunity to meet with your father and spend some time together. From this correspondence, we clearly see that Hunter Biden arranged a meeting for the representative of Burisma with his father, Joe Biden. Of course, they were not talking about the weather at that meeting. As you guessed it, most likely they discussed schemes for robbing Ukrainians. And by the way, Hunter Biden doesn't deny that there was such a meeting. He is more concerned with how and by whom this correspondence was made public. My laptop could be stolen or hacked. It could be Russian intelligence. This is not true. To put it mildly, not a single American special service has found a Russian trace in the story of the laptop. Having this information, it is interesting to listen to one more part of the telephone conversation between Petro Poroshenko and Joe Biden. But before that, we should recall the words of Joe Biden.
I have not taken a penny from any foreign source ever in my life. My son has not made money.
I think that within last 3 weeks, we demonstrate the real great progress in the reform. We voted in the parliament 100% tariffs, despite of the fact that the IMF expected only 75%.
Comparing all these facts, it becomes clear who the president of Ukraine worked for and why he raised tariffs. Squeezing the last pennies from the Ukrainians. After all, Joe Biden needed money. Even then, he planned to run for president of the United States. And we paid for his election campaign with increasing tariffs on utility bills. We were made slaves of the white master against our will. On the second day after shocking removal, the Prosecutor's General Office of Ukraine received an official letter from George Kent, a U.S. diplomat at the U.S. charge d'affaires et interne to Ukraine. He declares that the prosecutor's office is moving in the right direction, that they are doing great, but they shouldn't investigate the issue of using funds for reforming the prosecutor's office, which are allocated, by the way, by United States for the anti-corruption development of Ukraine. Funny, isn't it? The USA given the money to fight corruption, and this money goes to the establishment of international corruption in Ukraine. And Nikolai Zlochevsky helps Joe Biden to launder these trenches. As we can see on these scanned copies of letters between diplomats, instead of the prosecutor's office dealing with Zlochevsky schemes, it undergoes refresher courser under the program of the American Fund for Zlochevsky money. How long should we wait? Is it really impossible to arrest one single person? Your Highness, firstly, there were celebrations, then their arrests, and then they decided to combine all of it. This is a scandal copy of the Memorandum of Cooperation between USAID and Burisma. American and Ukrainian taxpayers pay for all these dubious formulations, which are indicated in the memorandum: the development of the energy community, innovative energy, the ideal mechanism for money theft and laundering. Viktor Shokin didn't abandon his investigation and was willing to testify against Burisma and the Bidens in any court in the world, but they tried to shut him up. While watching this film, of course, you may have many questions about personalities who were exposing international corruption. Of course, none of them is saint, but their nonsensity doesn't eliminate the fact of international corruption and external influence on Ukraine. With the coming of Vladimir Zelensky to power, the situation with the corrupt class of American government and the external control of Ukraine has not changed at all. We all remember the telephone conversation between Donald Trump and Vladimir Zelensky. There's a lot of talk about Biden's son, what Biden stopped the prosecution, and a lot of people want to find out about that. So whatever you can do with the Attorney General would be great. Biden went around bragging that he stopped prosecution, so if you can look into it, it sounds horrible to me. Since we have won the absolute majority in our parliament, and next prosecutor general will be 100% my person, my candidate, who will be approved by the parliament and will start as a new prosecutor in September. He or she will look into situation specifically to the company that you mentioned in this issue. The issue of the investigation of the case is actually the issue of making sure to restore the honesty. So we will take care of that and will work on the investigation of the case. The power is changing again. A little later, on June 12, 2020, Ukraine will be shaken by the news of the largest bribe not only in Ukraine but throughout Europe. $6 million. The bribe was intended for director of the NABU, Artyom Sitnik, and the special prosecutor, Nazar Kladnitsky, for the closure of the Burisma case. The bribe was handed over by the hand of the legal department of the Burisma company, Andrei Kicha. But here's what's important. Cases against Burisma are instituted and then closed with the wording that everything is clean there. So, what is the record bribe for then? For cases that don't exist. The initial amount of the bribe was not 6 million, which they put on the Sitnik's table, but 50 million. We think we need to repeat the previous question. 50 million bribe. For what? For the cases against Burisma and Hunter, which allegedly do not exist. This is arrogance. Using a telephone conversation between Trump and Zelensky, Joe Biden's team initiated the impeachment procedure against Donald Trump and later tried to destroy him as a politician. However, for us, this is just a struggle between two dragons fighting for power, including the control of Ukraine. Now we understand very well that Joe Biden, who became the 46th president of the United States, won this fight. Therefore, Vladimir Zelensky, 100% my person, Ruslan Ryabashapka, tried to close all cases against Burisma and Hunter Biden and most likely took most of the mega record bribe. Can you imagine the volume of banknotes amounting to 50 million? It is clear that such money couldn't be transferred in cash. Therefore, we turned the security service of Ukraine with a request to help establish an undercover company, which should have received the money. But then, the leadership of the Prosecutor General's Office of Ukraine changed. Ryabashapka replaced Lusenko. After that, the process of registering a 50 million bribe stopped, and Ryabashapka said that the Burisma case doesn't exist. How could the case not exist? If there was a bribe, and we remind, it was a record bribe in Europe, 6 million, but it was supposed to be 50 million. Such bribes are not given for nothing. And where did the 44 million of the bribe mentioned above go? This money was stolen from the people of Ukraine by Bidens and Burisma. For such a briber, authorities initiated criminal proceedings against Zlochevsky and his accomplice, issued a suspicion against them. But 9 months after Joe Biden's victory in the US elections, a sharp turn took place in the Zlochevsky case. According to honest Ukrainian law enforcement officers, Zlochevsky was taken out of the case using an invented legend implemented by attorneys in the investigation that allegedly Zlochevsky phone, using which he gave instructions to his accomplice about giving a bribe, was stolen by Russian hackers and was not with Zlochevsky in the United Arab but in Kiev. To confirm this, they received a fake report from the Ukrainian telephone company. Now the shimmers from NABU and Zlochevsky lawyers are trying to fit this fairy tale to the Ukrainian court and explain to the public that these were the intrigues of the aggressor country. I had many specialties, and for this I was on a special account in Odessa Criminal Investigation Department. And who were you in a peacetime? I served in the police. Oh, don't be afraid, we don't go after our friends. Apparently, when NABU and other Ukrainian law enforcement officers were issuing suspicion and accusation against Zlochevsky, Hunter Biden's book Beautiful Things was not yet been published, in which he explained his will to work for Burisma by his desire to ensure energy independence of Ukraine from Russian aggression. As you can see, under the current Ukrainian government, as under the previous one, the same tendency dominates. If you prioritize nationalism and the fight against the aggressor, then you are prescribed an indulgence and an individual procedure for considering criminal offenses. Journalists from different countries, including the United States, continue to study documents and facts under international corruption cases in Ukraine, presented by various law enforcement agencies and witnesses. But the toxic tentacles of the White Master of Ukraine, Joe Biden, are drawn to everyone who doesn't want to swallow his global lie. He harshly closes the mouths of the citizens of his country who dare to speak out about his corruption schemes and his influence on the politicals of other states. Having colonized Ukraine and tamed our politicals like monkeys, he used their own hands to deal with the Ukrainians he dislikes, who are not afraid to tell the truth about Biden's pseudo-democracy, behind which his slave-owning ambitions are hidden. We have already mentioned for former Prosecutor General of Ukraine, Viktor Shokin, for investigating the corruption of the Biden in Ukraine that tried to poison Viktor Shokin with mercury. Let us recall the statement and press conference of the member of the Parliament of Ukraine, Andrei Derkach, and former prosecutor Konstantin Kulik. Let's remember the diplomat Telizhenko. They have come under US sanctions for providing evidence of Ukrainian external control and exposing Biden's international corruption schemes. At the moment, two courts have already confirmed the authenticity of information that Burisma paid money to Joe Biden's family. And the defense side disputes not the fact of these payments, but only the amount of the money paid. And you say, Joe, that you didn't take the penny? You're lying. But sanctions are not the only methods they use. Recently, Andrei Derkach announced that a murder attempt was being planned against him. We think you have already guessed whose tentacles are involved in this again. We, investigative journalists, are worried about the fate of sovereign Ukraine. We want to live in a truly independent country, not in the cage made by Joe Biden. We do not want the presidents of other countries to raise tariffs for Ukrainians with one phone call. We do not want the presidents of other countries to put their watchers in the state-owned companies of Ukraine and siphon off money from the people. We do not want to be persecuted, chased, imprisoned, or killed for the truth. We, as citizens of Ukraine, are concerned that nothing changes with the change of the government. In Ukraine, the colonial scheme of external control is being played out again. The National Security and Defense Council of Ukraine has turned into Friday Fair with a line of smugglers waiting to gain immunity from sanctions. The NCDC has become an instrument of behind-the-scenes governance of the country and, on someone's instructions, is blocking the judicial system and canceling the Constitution of Ukraine. For a long time, President Vladimir Zelensky prepared and waited for a telephone conversation with Joe Biden. Call me. First telephone conversation between Joe Biden as President of the United States and Vladimir Zelensky, the President of Ukraine. From our investigation, we clearly see that strange things being to happen in Ukraine after such conversation and meetings, which appear from external governance, can no longer be charitabized in any way. Now the presidents are preparing for their first official meeting. They outlined the agenda of the meeting in a telephone conversation. Biden emphasized his administration's commitment to revitalizing strategical partnership in support of President Zelensky's plan to tackle corruption and implement a reform agenda based on our shared democratic value that delivers justice, security, and prosperity to the people of Ukraine. Is this some kind of Groundhog Day? A vicious circle? Today, Ukraine is again at the forefront of a geopolitical conflict. We do not want a plan of reforms that destroy our industry, medicine, education, parasitize on a democratic rhetoric and drive our homeland in a gray zone where the population survives in poverty and becomes slaves, and the state is a raw material appendage and bargaining chip for big brothers. It is not international corruption and phone calls of coming and going presidents that are important to us. We are concerned about the consequences that negatively affect the quality of life of every person in Ukraine. This is what really important for us. Only the brave can speak the truth. Only those who have nothing to fear and nothing to lose. I want this film to bring you the truth about global corruption and foreign interference and governance in Ukraine. The truth must be remembered and realized to make it easier to fight for a free, sovereign, and prosperous Ukraine in the future. Ukrainian lives matter.